of our prophets, he also traveled, right, to seek knowledge. And I'm going to try to make this a little bit interactive. So does anyone know which prophet traveled a long distance to gain knowledge? Because Allah told them that there was somebody else that knew something that you don't know. And then he said, I'm going to go and travel. So anyone, yes, Musa alayhi salam, he was the one that went on a long journey for knowledge. And you guys went on a journey. It might not have been as long as Musa alayhi salam, right? But it's still, you guys made the effort. So may Allah accept from every one of you for coming for his sake. And just to give everyone some background about me and why I'm doing this. So my name is Fahad, as you guys probably saw from the email. I've been with the community since about 2014. So that's about 11 years. And I'm probably one of the few people who moved here and doesn't work at UVA or doesn't study at UVA. Because most people usually when they come here, they either work at UVA or they study there or along those lines. But I am not, I don't work for UVA. But I do work in pharmacy, and I have a background in pharmacy, which will come into play later on as we get further along into the lectures and the whole parenting series. And my goal, since I was born and raised here, I've seen 3 generations of Islam. Since my parents were the first generation, then I would be considered second generation, and then my kids would be considered third generation, right? And the common thing that you might have seen online in some form or another is that, you know, the first generation comes and they're usually on their deen, right? They're on their religion. And they come here and their kids, they're the second generation, and it starts to dwindle away, right? Second generation, they know their parents are Muslim, they have some customs from their parents, they do some Islamic things here and there, and then by the third generation, it's usually on its way out the door, right? SubhanAllah. So obviously we don't want that for ourselves, for our children, and our future generations. And we need to think like the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? In his dua, which is in the Quran, where he says, Rabbi jalni muqima salati wa min dhurriyati, Rabbana wa taqabbal dua. So he said, oh Allah, make me amongst those who pray, right, who submit, and also my future generations. He didn't just think about himself, but he thought about not only his kids either. He didn't think just one generation ahead. Oh, as long as my kids are Muslim, then I'm good. No, he said my future generations to come. So he was thinking long term, and he didn't want to just do something for his kids and then just be like, okay, that's it, you know? So inshallah, our goal should also be the same way, which is to think long term. And I wanted to start off with a hadith that we've probably heard a lot, but it's very important that we once again discuss it and briefly and just as a reminder. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, you would tread the same path as was trodden by those before you, meaning you will go on the same path as those before you, inch by inch and step by step, so much so that if they had entered the hole of a lizard, you would follow them in this also. You would also follow them in the hole of a lizard. And we know that the hole of a lizard is not a safe place to be, right? It's basically going to lead you to destruction, yet we will do that. And then the Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, do you mean the Jews and the Christians? Meaning, are those the people that we're going to follow? And then the Prophet said, who else besides those two groups, right? And now we have that mentality amongst a lot of us. Even when I was younger, the mentality was, oh, I'm a Muslim, so as long as I believe, then, I'll be saved. And this is exactly the mentality of the Christians, right? Just believe that Jesus is your savior, and you can do whatever you want, and you'll be fine, right? And that's the same mentality that if we're not teaching our children and reinforcing, they will have the same thought process. That's the Christians, right? Now the other similar idea is, oh, but even if I do go to hell for a little bit, Allah will take me out in a few days or whatever, right? And this is who in the Quran? This is Bani Israel, where in Surah Baqarah, I believe, it says what? وَقَالُوا لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ إِلَّا أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَاتٍ. Oh, but the fire will only touch me for a few moments, so, inshallah, everything will be good, right? And I'm just telling you how the youth think, because I was born here and that's how I thought. And I'm pretty sure a lot of our youth, and I don't blame the youth, by the way. I don't blame anybody, because once you're in this environment, and it's just part of something that we need to remind ourselves about, that Islam isn't just about doing what, in terms of just belief, but it requires actions as well. So, inshallah, I just wanted to let you guys know that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is manifest, and I've seen it myself in my experiences. So now the one key thing, since our focus is to discuss the beginning of childhood, right? It's to start at the very beginning, because even at that early stage, a lot is going on that we might not realize, because we think, oh, they're just babies, so we don't have to really do a whole lot at that stage. But the first thing is that as parents, right, there's no such thing as being perfect, right? Whether it's us as parents or even our children, we can't expect perfection from either ourselves or from them, because first of all, perfection is Allah. Only Allah is perfect. Nobody else can be perfect. We can try our best, and we should try our best. And the best way to make sure we are trying and refining our techniques and making sure we're doing the right thing is that we have to be present to begin with, right? If we're not even there, then we're not going to be able to be a good parent. Because if you're, for example, if you're a parent that's traveling for work and you travel literally all week long, you come back home on the weekends, and then you go back again and travel. And this is the case a lot of the times where the father is on business trips all the time and he's not really there for his family. He's never going to be able to correct himself. If he makes a mistake, he might have to wait a week or two, then see his kids and try to correct something then. Whereas if he's in town a lot and he stays with his family and he decides to be with his kids, learn and negotiate, that's how you get better at anything, right? If you do something once, you're not going to get good at it. When we read the Surah Fatiha every day, I'm pretty sure that we can all read it confidently without any issues, right? But when it comes to, for example, Umrah and the rites of Umrah, even if you've gone 10 times, every time you go, you probably have to refresh yourself, because you probably don't do Umrah maybe once a year or something like that. So you still have to refresh yourself. So the same thing goes with parenting, both for fathers, but especially for mothers, because now, unfortunately, if we look at the trend now, and this has been going on for a while, where the trend is to basically make sure that both parents are outside of the house and the kids are being taught by the system, right? The school system, and that basically becomes the parent. And I was reading a little bit of Algeria. When Algeria was conquered by the French, they had a goal, and that they knew they had to do in order to actually get the people to assimilate into the French culture. And I'm quoting from the book, right? So the guy says, if we wish to strike at Algerian society in its structure, in its capacity for resistance, we must first of all conquer the women. We must go and seek them behind. We must go and seek them out behind the veil and in the houses where the men conceal them. To convert women, to win them over to foreign values, and to tear them away from their personal status is to gain a real power over the men, and at the same time to possess the practical and effective means to dismantle Algerian culture. So they knew that if they can get to the woman and make them change, then they can basically slowly from the inside destroy the culture and essentially the religion of Islam. And then they continue, they say what? The Muslim woman loves children. As the guardian of moral values, she raises them in ancestral traditions, the legends and myths. So now, what do you think that guy is talking about when he says that she raises the woman in ancestral traditions, the legends and myths? Anybody want to take a guess? Asatirul awwaleen, right? Allah says in the Quran that the people will say that this Quran is just ancient stories and tales. So this guy is saying that the women use the ancestral traditions, right? The Quran, the Sunnah, the legends and the myths, referring to the Quran basically. And Allah said that's what they will call the Quran, legends and myths, and He says legends and myths. She constitutes the bedrock of the family cell, the dynamic element of tribal life, and she was particularly hostile to European penetration. She concentrated herself, the patriotism and unity of the people. So once again, this shows us the status of women, right, in Islam. It shows us how high of a status they have. And the Prophet ﷺ himself said, the world is enjoyment, and the best enjoyment is in this world is what? A righteous spouse, a righteous wife, sorry, not spouse, what? A righteous wife. So this is literally the best thing that one can have, because she is going to be the one who will raise the future generations, be they men or women. For every Khalid ibn Walid that's out there, or Salahuddin Ayyubi that's out there was a mother behind that raised that child in order for them to become who they were. So once again, presence is very important, and especially in the early years, from birth to 3 and even 6 years old. In these early years, it's best that the woman is at home with the baby, because there's a lot going on inside this child that we will dissect, inshallah. And if the woman is busy working during these stages, then it's actually going to be a disservice for the child. And the woman will be conflicted based on her wanting to be with the child, but then also because she's been told she needs to go out and work, now she's going to be conflicted between what she should do and where she should set her priorities. Now, this might not be something that we might think about, whether you're first of all, I just want to ask, how many parents here were born in the United States that are in the audience right now? Any parents? No. Okay, so you guys are first generation, right? Okay, so some of this stuff sounds foreign to you because you grew up knowing that, yes, the man is going to go to work and the woman is going to take care of the children, and that's how the society functions, right? The man depends on the wife to do what she needs to do by raising the children, and then the wife depends on the husband, make sure he's working and providing, right? And that system's been working since the beginning of time. But when we come here and we look here, that whole system has been disrupted. And as I said earlier, with the Algerian part of their strategy. So for example, now, when a woman, for example, she is a full-time and she works full-time, right? What ends up happening is that the child is more likely to show behavioral problems and insecurities than that of a mother who stays at home full-time with the children. And just for reference, a lot of the information that I got today is from a book that is actually written by a woman. She's not a Muslim, but she wrote this book, and I took a lot of my information from here. And in this book, basically, she talks about how it's critical for women to be at home during the first 3 years. That's her opinion, but obviously the longer you stay at home with your kids, the better it'll be for them. So this isn't just me talking about what I think. A lot of these facts are from her book and her research. It's called Being There: Why Prioritizing Motherhood in the First 3 Years is Matters. And she's a family counselor, and she's been doing this for a long time. So just to give everyone some background information about that, inshallah. All right. So another common thing in society is that when a lady has a child, when a mother has a child, they go on leave, right? They get like a parental leave, and it's usually about 3 months or so. And a lot of people think that that's plenty of time for me to get situated with my baby and have the baby then the baby can go to daycare or something along those lines, right? But it's not the way our children are born and babies are born. They're not like ducks or geese, right? Because you know how with geese or ducks, if they see somebody, they're going to think that's their mother right away, within minutes. And then they'll follow that person or that creature and because they've seen and they've already bonded and attached, right? But our children, they're not like that. They require years to bond, right? It's not a simple process. And she said something that says, bonding is putting the pieces together, and then attachment is gluing them in place. So there's bonding, and then there's attachment for the child with the mother. Another issue is that sometimes parents believe that in the beginning, any caregiver will be okay because the child, once again, is just a baby. They don't know anything. Anybody can change a diaper, feed, sleep the baby. That's all we need to do, right? But actually, a child, to a baby, only the sounds and smells and looks of her mother are more important, and the baby can actually determine. So she basically mentions that babies are more attuned to their environment than many mothers might believe, right? And they can identify who's their mother versus who's not their mother, even at a very early stage. And it wasn't too long ago where when you gave birth to a baby, they would take the baby, put the tags, make sure they match them up with you, and then they put them in a nursery. And then the baby stays there for a day or two, right? Comes to the mother every once in a while. But now they know the research. Now they know the research, and the minute the baby is born, the baby is given to the mother, and they tell the mother, put the baby on your skin, because that helps the baby. Because the baby's been inside of the mother for 9 months, and now you've taken the baby out. She's going to want to be with her mother, so you need to put the baby on you, right, directly. So right from the beginning, we see that the mother's presence is very critical. And actually, there's also studies that say that babies as young as 6 months, they mourn when their mothers are not present or leave them for a long period of time. So if a mother leaves her baby for a long time, and a long time could be 8 hours, 10 hours, right, which is a full work day, and the baby mourns. Mourning meaning they think that the mother dies, right? And that's gonna mess up the child, especially at that age. So, and they wrote, he's a psychoanalyst. He wrote that if a child is taken from his mother's care at this young age, when he is so possessively and passionately attached to her, it is indeed as if his world has been shattered. To the child of 2 with his lack of understanding and complete inability to tolerate frustration, it is really as if his mother had died. So, subhanAllah, this is, now obviously when we look at the child, we can't sense that, right? We can't think that. But they've studied children long term and they've seen what happens to their behavior patterns. And this is one of the things that happens. And it's so important, the role of the mother, right? That even gay couples, which obviously Islam is completely against, but if two men were to have a baby or adopt a child, which unfortunately is a reality that we live in, even in that scenario, they have to, one of the two dads has to assume the role of the nurturer and the mother, believe it or not, because the way a father nurtures a child and a way a mother nurtures a child is two different things. The father, when he has a baby, he expresses different hormones, right? The one hormone is called vasopressin. It doesn't matter what the name is, but he exerts or he stimulates different hormones, which makes him have that more protective kind of attitude, right? Providing, protecting, and the mother develops a hormone called oxytocin. Don't worry about the names, right? But the point being, that hormone makes the mother more willing to nurture, take care of the baby, make him or her stop crying, make sure everything's okay, cuddle, all those things, right? So, and there's now even potential pharmaceutical implications, right? Of course, the pharmaceutical industry will capitalize on anything. So now they can market this hormone of oxytocin, which is for women, that they naturally make after they have a baby. They can give it to the dad that needs to be the mom, right? They can give it to the dad that needs to be the mother, so he can be the quote unquote mother to this child, right? SubhanAllah. So what Allah has done naturally, the fitrah of the men and women, they're trying to replicate that in their own way, and it's obviously just going to lead to more issues because at the end of the day, it comes down to money, right? That's all that matters, apparently. Okay. Another common conception is, right, that the newborn, they're so small, there's no point for me to really hang out with them because then I can't interact with them. They're just, once again, they're just eating, they're pooping, sleeping, and that's it, right? So why do I need to really be there? And I don't know, but I've heard of people online that talk about what they did when they had kids and how they knew. Now they realize what they did was wrong. And in one case, a brother said that he really didn't spend, for the first 5 years, he was busy with work and he basically didn't even spend any time with his kid for 5 years. Imagine that, right? So the mother did everything, but then later on he realized obviously that that's not right. You have to be there. Obviously the role, once again, is different for the father, but he still has to be there and do what a father normally does. Obviously, we're talking about very early stages right now, so I'm not going to get into all those nitty-gritty details of what a father does, but any father here could tell you it's the play, it's the allowing them to wrestle, and that helps them learn their limits and their boundaries and where they can test and gain confidence in themselves. Now, this part here is very critical because since we don't see what's going on, what actually is going on is actually one of many miracles of Allah. And where is that the baby's brain within the first year of life, it doubles in size. So you can imagine all the connections in the brain, all the neurons that are firing back and forth, all this stuff that's going on in the brain. You can't see it, I can't see it, right? They're not under a scanner of some sort where you can visualize all that stuff, but there's a lot going on in their head. And by age 1, the brain doubles in size. By age 3, it's about 80% of an adult in terms of volume. And by age 5, it's about 90% of an adult. So you can see, once again, the very early stages of life are critical because there's a wiring phase, first of all. Right? In this wiring phase of the brain, the child's brain forms more than 1 million new connections every second. And I fact-checked that, so that's not exaggeration. So imagine 1 million new connections every second. And by age 3, a child has roughly 1,000 trillion connections, about twice as many as an adult brain. And then after this peak, Then there's the pruning phase, right? So imagine like a tree that's growing. Now you have to prune it and cut what you don't need. And so that's when the child's brain fine tunes to whatever its strengths are, right? So now imagine this first 3 years, right? Critical window. It's the the brain is very plastic during this stage because it can adapt quickly. It can adapt quickly, but if it's only if it's properly developed. And we mentioned earlier how if the mother isn't present, the child will mourn the loss of her mother. That'll affect the brain's development. If the mother is working full time and the dad's working full time, and the child is in a daycare situation, it's actually a high stress situation because now you have what's called the revolving door of caretakers. You have one person one day, the child thinks that's her mom. Then the next day, another person's taking care, the child thinks that's the mom. Constantly leaving the child, different persons coming in, the child never attaches and they get stressed out, right? They're getting stressed out and now their brain is not developing the way it should develop. And one of the scholars, I'm not gonna name him, but he's quite liberal in his views, right? He's quite liberal in his views, but even he said that daycare is like a prison. He just said it flat out without it, and he was kind of angry the way he said it because this daycare system that we try to rely on, once again, if you're first generation here, you probably never even seen a daycare, but when it comes to second generation and third generation, it's more common. And a lot of the energy that a baby consumes, right, whatever the food they're getting, about 60% of that goes directly towards fueling the brain and during these early stages. And one of the things I remember studying is that, if a baby is born, for example, and they have a health issue where they're having seizures or epilepsy, as maybe some of you might know, and they're constantly having this issue, sometimes what will have to happen is they will have to take off half the brain of this baby, right? Like do a major surgery, remove half the brain, but that same child can live practically a normal life still because, once again, the brain is growing, right? It's very plastic still. It can make new connections. It can rewire itself on half a brain, and the child can function normally and grow up to function as a normal human being, subhanAllah. Once again, it's one of the miracles of Allah that as you study science, you appreciate even more. Whereas if you were to take any if you were to take any adult brain and you were to remove half of someone's brain, right, what's gonna happen? It's too late, right? The guy's done. The guy's gonna die. It's impossible. And that's why a child at a young age can learn a language so easily, right? They can learn just like a lot of us that maybe migrated here. We don't speak English as well, but our children know it like subhanAllah, right? They know it really well because they came here when they were young or they were born here and they picked it up and everything is good. Now, another new phenomenon, more so today than in the past, is that people tend to get bored very easily, right? Because now we have so many things that can stimulate us and take our attention away, like the cell phone, right? Where's my phone here? See, I'm trying to find my phone and I'm distracted already. But the cell phone itself is very distracting, right? And it's very easy now to get bored if you don't have your phone and you almost feel like, oh, I gotta do something, I need my phone or whatever. But part of life is, and used to be, just to not really have a lot to do. And this time is one where we can take advantage and remember Allah, right? For example, when we're bored, we can do some dhikr or something along those lines. But now that we're so bored, and if we're just with our child, it's gonna make us want to just go on our phone because the child, once again, isn't important. They're just sitting there, they're not doing a whole lot. So we should just go on our phone, and then we get bored of of our child, and then we're like, well, maybe I should, put him in a daycare or something. They'll interact with people, but that's actually not the right way to look at it, because once again, we shouldn't undervalue the mother-child bond so easily. And even though we used to have the village, right? We used to have the village that would help us out. Back home, we probably had more help than we do over here. But even then, we have a lot of conveniences, modern conveniences. And sometimes it's more than okay, of course, to have like your mother help you, or just other people in your family that are consistent in helping with raising the child. And also, if we look at when a baby is born, Allah puts a lot of mercy in the mother, because during that time, for example, she's excused from doing some of the obligations because of bleeding after giving birth, right? So she's given that mercy from Allah, where she doesn't have to worry about the obligations like the prayer and stuff, and she can dedicate her time to taking care of the baby. And also, when we were talking about the whole issue of spending time with the kid, and how sometimes people want to say, well, I'll work 3 days a week, 12-hour shifts or whatever. I'll work a lot of time during these 3 days, but then I'll be home for 4 days. That, if someone has to work, for example, right? If they must work because it's a necessity, and these issues are a reality today, and even in a situation like that, it's better to work smaller hours over more days, because you don't want to, once again, put long gaps inside of the child's presence with the mother, because once again, the child will not attach properly, they will feel insecure, their stress levels go up, their cortisol levels go up, and the more stress they have, the more it'll affect their brain. And even with daycares, initially when daycares were a thing, or like preschools, even for like 2-year-olds or 2.5-year-olds, initially it was only supposed to be for like 2-3 hours, where you drop off the kid 2-3 hours and that's it, because they know the child after that amount of time away from her mother, they're not going to be able to actually function properly, and it's not good for their health. And it's only because of economic reasons, right, where the parents made the push, like, no, I need you to take my kid for 8 hours. Do you have an 8-hour program? Or you have a 10-hour program? Instead of just a 2-hour or 2.5 or 3-hour program. So because the parents basically were forcing the daycares, the demand was there, so they said, okay, fine, we'll do this 8-hour system that it wasn't designed for. And obviously when you make a big change like that, the system, it's not gonna be good for the baby at the end of the day. With the constant revolving door of caretakers, because you gotta remember, in a daycare, it depends on the state. I don't know what the rules are in Virginia, but you're assigned like 3, 4, or 5 kids per person. So how is one person gonna take care of 5 or 4 kids even, right? At once, they're all crying. You can't pick them all at the same time. You have to pick one, soothe them maybe, and then get another one, do it, get another one, do it. It's not gonna be, for example, it's like jail, all right? Just like the guy has said, right? You have a jail cell with 20 people and you gotta feed them all. Are you gonna give them all a gourmet meal? If it was in jail, right? If it was just 20 people and you had a limited amount of time, they can't all have a premium experience, right? The ratio is not in their favor. Same thing in the daycare. The ratio is 5 babies to 1 caretaker, and at home it's 1-to-1, right? 1 baby, 1 mother. And we all know the ratio matters, because when people apply to college, they look at the ratio, right? How many students per teacher ratio is the average in this college? Because the smaller the ratio, the better the education. If there's 40 kids to 1 teacher, that one-on-one experience with the teacher isn't gonna be as strong, and you might not learn as much. But if the ratio is like 15-to-1, okay, this school has a better ratio, there's going to be more one-on-one with the teacher. My child will do better in some way. So let's look at this school, right? So same thing when it comes to the one-on-one with the mother. There's no competition, really. There really is no competition. And I'm not trying to, judge anybody who has to work. Like I said, it might be a necessity for some people where they have to have both people work. And, inshallah, may Allah make it easy for everybody, right? But sometimes we have to actually look within ourselves and actually ask ourselves, do we really need to do that, right? Everyone has to do this on their own. I can't assume anyone else's situation, but every family has to do an analysis and assessment. Is it really best for both of us to work and our kid is in a daycare program or something like that? Or should one of us stay home? Can one of us stay home and, like the mother, and then the father work? And maybe even if he has to work a little extra, it'll still be better than both of them having to work. All right. And once again, when it comes to the time factor, for the mother, it's not just the quality of time you spend, it's the quantity of time you spend with your child. Because they did some research where they found, it's a Pew charitable research, they found that the typical working mother, she spends an average about 90 minutes per day with her child when they are already exhausted and they're not even in the mood to really be with their kid at a high level, right? Because if you work all day long and then you come home, you don't really want to do anything energetic anymore because you're exhausted, you're tired. So unfortunately, a lot of the times the mothers they provide their child with a leftover time, right? All their hard time is done at work, and then they come home, and their leftover time is for the baby, and that's just not going to lead to a good development for the child. And they mention once again, there simply is no real substitute for physical presence. And in terms of the father, it's different, right? It's different because the father has to go out to work. This is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to provide for your family, right? So he won't be there as much. And for him, it's not about quantity or how much time, but the quality of that time, that when he is with the kid, he spends a good time with that child. He's not on his phone and just doing stuff here, right? You have to actually interact, play, look at them. So now, another thing is when it comes to breastfeeding. So we all know that even from a scientific perspective, that the milk of the mother is better in every way for the child than a formula. There's antibodies in the milk from the mother, which allows for protection of the child from infections and all kinds of other benefits. And there's not going to be any issues in terms of reactions or side effects as compared to a formula. And it's also free, right? It's basically free. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to mix it or do this and that. It's a lot better for the child. But beyond the nutritional benefits, there's a lot of, once again, psychological benefits and in terms of the development of the baby, where the baby knows what the mother smells like. The baby can see the mother as the baby's being fed, right? All of those things are there. And the baby, in its mind, all those connections are happening, right? Remember we said a million connections per second? Imagine that. All this is going on over years and years, where the mother is there to soothe the child when she's crying, when he's crying, when she's feeding, and this child really attaches to this mother. And now whatever that mother will tell that child as the child is growing up, she will internalize that to a level that I can't even explain to you. Another Another thing that people do that's not correct is they think they're going to spoil their baby by being there too much. Oh, my baby's going to get spoiled because I'm always there, and they're going to become spoiled, right? But you can't really spoil your baby when they're less than a year old, right? Because a child's independence is built on a foundation of dependency, right? So in order for your child to eventually be independent, they have to first know that they can rely on you and you took care of them before they have that confidence to go out on their own. So just like I was talking about earlier about cortisol. So cortisol is that hormone that when you see something scary, right? Maybe you see a bear or something, right? The common example is you're out hiking and you see a bear and you want to run away, right? So your body reacts how? It dumps sugar into your bloodstream from within your body cells, right? It dumps sugar into your bloodstream because you need that energy. It raises your blood pressure and it makes your vision a little bit sharper as well. All these things are going on. It shuts down your GI system so you don't have to feel like you go into the bathroom anymore. That shuts down because now you need to run, right? You need to get out of there. And that's exactly what happens to a baby when they're stressed out. So imagine a baby that's constantly stressed out for years and years and years because they were in the daycare system where they're mourning the loss of their mother because she's not around. And each time a new person comes that they think is their mother, they don't put their full attachment towards that person because they know it's going to change anyway. And this is what leads to children having behavioral issues as they grow older. This is obviously not the only thing, but in my opinion and her opinion, the expert who counsels families, this is what she sees all the time with working mothers and their troubles with their children. Even though the child has everything from a financial, and they have all the toys and all the gadgets and everything, but the child still is not behaving well. Because they need you. They don't need your money, they don't need your gadgets, they don't need any of that. They need you to be there, or the mother especially. And they did a study on rats that licked and groomed their children. So the baby rats that were licked and groomed by their mothers were more resilient to stress, meaning when a stressful situation happened, they weren't like anxious about it. Whereas the ones who were not groomed properly, who didn't have their mother take care of them, were more anxious, even though the other ones were not anxious. And just to mention the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, right, where one of the Bedouins came to the Prophet and he said to the Prophet ﷺ, "Do you kiss your children?" And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Yes." And then the Bedouin replied, "But we, by Allah, never kiss our children." Right? So this guy was thinking he was doing the right thing, like, I'm a tough guy, you know? Like, oh no, we don't kiss our children. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, "What can I do if Allah has taken away mercy from you?" So this shows a side from the father's side as well, that there's nothing wrong with the father taking care of the baby. Obviously, the mother can't be there 24/7. And those of you who have children, you guys understand what I mean when I say the father does his part, right? It won't be as much for sure. It just isn't. It's not. Fathers aren't like that. If fathers were in charge of babies, subhanAllah, this world would cease to exist, right? If fathers were in charge of babies, we just don't have that capacity the way a mother does. And just like I was telling you guys earlier, the hormones of a mother and a father are different. The father, he's more protective. And they've even done studies where when the baby cries at night, the father can still sleep and tune it out, right? But the mothers are the ones that can hear it and it triggers them and they go to the baby. But if there was like a crashing sound in the house or some sort of breaking glass sound in the house, then the father actually would react more than the mother, because that's just the way Allah created the man and the woman. That's part of the fitrah that Allah has given us. So another myth is that babies are born strong and resilient, right? That they're already strong, they don't need to be like pampered so much. That it's okay to treat them a little bit rough. And this is probably something the fathers think about more than the mothers, right? And just from personal experience, when we had our first baby, we were following the typical Western values, like, okay, the baby, she's like 3 months now, she can sleep in her own room, right? She can sleep in her own room, and if she cries, sleep training, right? Sleep training is I don't know the whole thing about sleep training, but in general, it's to just let them calm themselves down, and they'll go back to bed, right? So we tried that, and it wasn't working, and my wife's like, I don't care, I'm going to her, and I need to soothe her, right? She's like, screw this plan, I got to go and take care of my child. So, and she was right, I was wrong, right? That wasn't the right way to take care of a crying child. A crying child needs to be taken care of. Once again, they're very small, they're very fragile. They need to be pampered for the first 2-3 years, very like taken care of by the mother, because that is how they become resilient later on. If you don't pamper them in the beginning, it'll mess up their development, and then later on, they will be emotionally distraught, and their behavior becomes a problem in a school setting or just in general. So when you pamper them early, and you soothe them early, and you are very close to them early, that makes them stronger later on. Unfortunately, we want to rush it. We want it to be quicker, just like everything else, right? We're in this world now where everything is so easy and quick that we just want to make them strong in the beginning, make them this and that, tough. They can sleep by themselves, put them in that room, they're going to cry. Let them just stop. They'll be quiet eventually, but then later on, the problems will start. So once again, we have to take care of them from the very beginning. And a lot of these Western parenting styles, I'm in the middle of another book that I'm reading, and she talks about how the way kids are raised in the West compared to like in other cultures is completely different. And if we were to adapt other cultures' ways of living, it'd be a lot easier, because over here they say when your baby is born, the baby can't sleep next to you in the same bed, right? That's what they say, because they say that first of all for liability reasons. They say that because they don't want to get sued if your baby dies. May Allah protect all of our children, because you rolled over the child or something like that. But once again, most Americans, a lot of Americans, unfortunately, but the reality is they drink and they do other things that cause their mind to get messed up, right? They drink, drugs, whatever. These are normal things, even for mothers, and so on and so forth. So that's why they have to just say no baby in the bed, because when you're drugged up like that, you can move all over the place and you will have no idea, and you could roll over your child. But for many normal people, it's perfectly normal to have your baby in your bed. Once again, every person needs to do their own research. If one of you rolls a lot, then no, right? But if both of you are pretty normal and you stay in your spots, and you want to put the baby in the middle with some covering, because in the middle of the night, the sooner you soothe, the better for the baby. And if the baby is either outside of the bed or in another room, you might not hear for a while, or it's just a lot easier and better in every way to take care of them if they're right next to somebody. So I just want to go over a few more points, and then I'll be done in a little bit, and then we can have some questions and answers. So once again, in terms of daycares, right, and what that does to a child, increases stress, increases their cortisol levels, because it's a noisy place, it's overstimulating, And the last thing a baby needs when they're crying is to be overly stimulated. If a baby is crying, the mother clings and calms him down. What does the father normally try to do? Play with a toy to stop the baby from crying, right? Here's a toy, jiggle the toy. That actually stresses the baby out more because now you're overstimulating the child. So it actually makes the problem worse. And since they're born with an underdeveloped central nervous system, they rely on the mother to regulate their sensory input. And this is impossible to do in a group setting, like a daycare, for example. And if it's chronic, if this daycare and this high cortisol is chronically done, is chronic, then it can once again mess up the brain and also alter the structure of the limbic system, which is the emotional center of the child, making the child more prone to anxiety and less resilient to stress later in life. And in an Oxford study, they found that a child's participation in group daycare before the age of 2 increases the chance of developing behavioral issues, especially aggression and anger. And this aggression and anger is actually a reaction to fear. The child feels a fear of like abandonment and loss in that group setting. And because they lacked a dedicated soother, since they get constant different people, that they convert that fear into a aggression to protect themselves. Now, I just want to end with one hadith and then one ayah of the Quran. So in this hadith, once again, just to show the importance of the home, right, in Islam. So there was a Sahabiya by the name of Asma bint Yazid. She was one of the Ansari Sahabiyat, right? So she went to the Prophet ﷺ, and he was with the Sahaba. They were having a discussion or whatever. And then she said to him, Allah sent you with the truth to both the men and to the women. We believed in you, and we believed in the God who sent you to us. And indeed, the women of Medina are confined the foundations of your homes. They are the foundations of your lusts and the carriers of your children. That we, the women of Medina, we are the pillars of our homes. We take care of the needs of our house, right? We care for our husbands, and we fulfill all the needs of the house, and we bear the children. And you, the men of Medina, you have been blessed with the Friday prayer, the congregational prayer, the nursing of the sick, the funeral prayer, right? And the Hajj and all of that. So she's saying that we're at home and we're doing all these things, but you guys get extra rewards because you get to go to Jummah prayer. You get to go to the congregational prayer where the reward is 27 times more, right? You guys do the janazah prayer and bury the dead and so on, and you get all those extra rewards. And then she says that the men amongst you have been given this preference. They've been given this ability to go from one Friday to the next, right? To go to pray Jummah alongside you, Ya Rasulullah, and the prayer alongside of you, and they get to go and they visit the sick and they do all these things. And she's basically saying, Ya Rasulullah, do we get a share of all of this ajr? Do we get a share of this reward? Because we're in our homes and we're doing all the other things that need to be done. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, so the Sahaba, believe it or not, they were actually a little bit angry with her because of what she just said. Because obviously she's talking to the Prophet ﷺ, and to them, it seems like she's being disrespectful, right? But the Prophet ﷺ then turns to the Sahaba and they ask, have you ever heard a woman give a more beautiful speech than what this woman just gave, right? And then the Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, she was aggressive in what she was saying to you. But the Prophet ﷺ said to her, and she said, go, O woman of the Ansar. So he said, go back to the women and let them know that when they do all of these things that you mentioned, and they show that goodness towards their husbands and they follow them and they take care of the home and they do all of that they will have all of that and the entire reward as well. Subhanallah. So once again, the Prophet ﷺ is telling Asma bint Yazid, right, the Ansari, go tell all the women that you will get the reward too, the same reward. Not a portion of it, the same. Not copy or not cut and paste, but copy paste, right? The same exact reward. So Asma turned around and she started saying, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. Pleased with what she had just heard. So once again, subhanAllah, this is very powerful, I think, because it shows us that there is a way for both the woman and the man to go to Jannah, right? There's a way for both of them to go, but it's not the same path, right? It's not going to be the same path. But they have the same opportunity to get to Jannah, even though the path that they take is different. And unfortunately, in society today, it seems as if, it doesn't seem as if the colonializers, they knew physically that if they can get the woman out of the house, that they can destroy the house and in a sense destroy Islam for that generation, if not beyond. Whereas we see here that the house is the bedrock of society. And a lot of the Christians have realized this, and they've started doing things such as homeschooling their children and stuff like that. But that's a topic for another day. My last thing I wanted to say would be ayah number 1 of Surah An-Nisa, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nasu taqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahida wa khalaqa minha zawjaha wa batha minhuma rijalan kathiran wa nisaa wattaqullaha alladhi tasaaluna bihi wal arham inna Allaha kana alaykum raqiba. O humankind, be mindful of your Lord who created you from a single soul, and from it created its mate, and from the pair of them spread countless men and women far and wide. Be mindful to Allah, in whose name you make requests of one another, and beware of severing the ties of kinship, for God is always watching over you. And we hear this ayah a lot, if not in every khutbah. It's like one of the key ayahs, and it ends with وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ, right? Be mindful of severing the ties of kinship. Now, sometimes we don't even realize that we might be severing the ties of kinship at the very first year of life of that baby. It could be within the first 2 or 3 years. We might have severed or severely damaged that tie, that kinship with the child, because we've essentially put the child in an environment where they were not able to develop properly and they were not able to internalize who their caretaker was. And once again, the behavioral issues are manifest as they get older, and then the cascade from that point gets even worse. But that will be in a future episode when we discuss older children, bi'ithnillah. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask anything. It could be anything. Don't be shy. We're all here to learn from one another, inshallah. Yes?
First off, Jazakallah khairan for this talk. I just have a general question and a general comment. So the general question, just out of curiosity, the author of that book, is she a Muslim?
No, so the author of this book is not a Muslim, but like anything we study, so the question was, is the author of this book being there a Muslim? And so she is not a Muslim, but like with any type of knowledge we take, we always have an Islamic filter, right? Whenever we study anything, we have an Islamic filter, and we take the good and we leave out the bad. I mean, she says other things about how women should have sexual freedom and explore before committing to a relationship, but obviously we don't believe that, right? So we don't take that from her, but we take the other things that are in line with what Islam talks about, and that's how we approach anything in our life. Jazakallah khair for the question, and thank you for asking that one, actually. That was a good one.
So the general comment is, so the model that is being proposed, or it's more like a theory, where is you have the mother not working and the father is taking care of stuff and then no daycare and being homeschooled. So that's one way to look at it, but sometimes, as you mentioned during the course of your talk, sometimes that's not really an option for many families. And one would argue that actually in the majority of the families now, they have to be, for financial reasons, for educational reasons, for many other reasons. It has to be like the woman has to work and the children has to go to school. So it's one way to think about it. Is that it's not just one way, one theory or one model, and that in this life, in this, especially with all the, like I said, the financial burdens, it may not be feasible for all families. And from personal experience, I can see that people that went to regular schools and their mother used to like work full time and all that, they turned out fine, and I think it's like a case by case kind of thing. And on the other hand, you can see other people where they were like homeschooled or like being like didn't go to daycare or anything like that. Once they go to college, then that's like a big like shock for them, and they are like socially awkward, and so it's one way to think about it. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah khair. So I don't know if that went through the audio for those who are on like Facebook, but the brother made a comment that, there's a lot of families that might have to work and have dual income just to survive. And I understand that I understand that's the case. I'm not saying that everyone has to do exactly something one particular way, but at the same time, and also that he mentioned that when it comes to families who maybe homeschool and do all the things that are right, but then when they grow up, they could still turn out bad. And there's a lot of people who grew up where both parents worked and everything was okay with the kids, and they grew up successful and everything was fine. I'm not saying that that can't happen with whatever path a family decides to do, but when it comes to statistically speaking, what I've seen and what the author has seen, just in general, in terms of children who are not taken care of and they don't have the motherly figure in the home, it does generally lead to worse outcomes, right? But yeah, there's always going to be exceptions to that rule in any situation. But I would do a little pushback, and I would say that thinking, once again, not just individually, but as an ummah, right? As an ummah, what is the best for this ummah, generally speaking? If more and more of us go down the path of, once again, following the path of the Jews and the Christians, as the hadith said, it's only going to keep getting worse and worse. So we should have systems in place, and people, if, for example, somebody can't stay at home, and once again, like I said, do a real evaluation between the family needs to do an evaluation and really decide what's best and what they can do and what should be done. And if they can have a stable caretaker, she mentions that as well in the book, a stable, like a grandmother, for example, or someone who, once again, there's not a revolving door of caretakers, then having one, even if it's not the mother, would still be a lot better than constantly switching people out. Jazakallah khair. Any other questions? Any questions on the messages on the Facebook or? Oh, okay. Maybe, okay. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزاك الله خير.